everyone, and welcome back to Pretend Worlds, Real People. In the words of so many people around me as I grew up, Tyler, you're freaking weird, man. Stop being weird. But joke's on you guys, that's never going away because I am crazy. And I'm a little bit loopy because I filmed today. I'm going back tomorrow for a commercial shoot. It's been a ton of fun. It's been a busy week. And it's always those pitfalls at the beginning of each week where you feel like most most creatives say, "Yeah, I'm never going to work again," especially actors. And then something comes up. So we are so thankful for the work. However, it does take a lot out of you on the day to day. But I have plenty of energy and loopy silliness for this episode intro because this is a supplemental episode for the week. I had the great fortune of so many guests for the month of October, and we're not done yet. That's the crazy part. But I've had so many amazing people just come onto the show, share their story, and I've had so much fun just sitting down and talking with them. I couldn't do it week by week. I had to toss in a few doubles here and there. So that brings me to who I have for this episode. And I love her film, Lucky. I saw Imitation Girl after our interview and absolutely loved it. And I can't wait to see what she does next in the proposed and announced VHS 85. I think that'll be next year. But we don't have any spoilers for that film, of course. It's under lock and key, but I'm so pumped to see what she does with it. Of course, I'm talking about Natasha Kermani. She is a screenwriter, a director, and just the ultimate creative force in what it means to bring your vision to life from script to screen. And of course, we talk about her upbringing, the fact that her dad is a huge cinephile and had shown her all these really classic movies, and how she just really adopted this sort of love for cinema, and how that led to her attending NYU and then eventually going into just making her own films. It was fantastic talking about not only her career but the dorky things I like to talk about, like what she enjoys doing outside of her career, and what her writing process is like when we get to the real nitty gritty of the dorky stuff. So without further ado, let's jump right in. Let's sit down and let's chat with the amazing Natasha Kermani.
Yeah, my name is Natasha Kermani. I'm a writer and director living in Los Angeles. I'm from New York originally, so I would like to make sure I'm not from LA, but LA is my adopted home. And yeah, I primarily work in the feature space, and I make genre movies, so sci-fi, horror, all the fun stuff.
That is okay. I have to touch on. I've heard this continuously the last few episodes, but why did you leave New York? It seems like everybody who's from there loves it so much.
Yeah, New York is amazing. I mean, at the end of the day, I think LA really is still the home for movies. It is Hollywood. It is kind of still where everybody is, and it is movie town in a lot of ways. And so I think, my husband is also from New York, and we had been working for a while in New York, and we just really felt like we had hit a ceiling there. And we dream of going back, but I think for us it was like, okay, let's go, let's explore, let's see what opportunities we have in California. And in a lot of ways, I think we've fallen in love with California. The state of California is just absolutely beautiful, and opened up, I think, a lot of aspects that you don't really have access to in New York, right? Like sort of
Yeah.
you can drive to the mountains in 40 minutes, and so that sort of aspect I think was also appealing to us. But yeah, I mean, look, New York will always be where our hearts are, where our hearts is. But also LA, I think, is changing. I think it is becoming a little bit more, even just like walkable. I think there's a lot of East Coasters here now, which I'm sure LA people are very upset about. um, but I think we sort of bring our sensibilities a little bit to the city. But yeah, it's just for work is
Yeah.
the short
Just for
answer.
work. Well, I'm I'm interested in how you even garnered an interest in this industry, or especially as a director as well. When did that start for you? Have you always been someone with that cinematic sensibility, or was it something you fell into? How did that start for you?
Yeah, so my mom actually works in. She was a performance artist. So growing up, she was on stage quite a bit, doing performance art and theater and music. So I kind of grew up around stages, I guess,
Mm.
around music and musicians and artists and performers, really. And so I think that was the arts was always sort of felt like accessible to me in that way, and it felt very comfortable, and so I think that's sort of a huge privilege to have, because a lot of folks, it's very mysterious, right? Like, how does this work, right? Like, how does a stage play get put on, how does a performance get created, etc. So I think having that kind of fast track to that world, was really great, just to have access to in that way. And then the film of it all, I think I just really loved going to the movies. And my dad, who is not in the arts, is just a big cinephile, and he just really loves movies and movies, like he would show me Alien and Braveheart and
Oh
the
my
the
god.
movies, right? Like the ones
Yeah.
that made us. And so I think it was the combination of sort of access to the real world of being a professional in the creative arts, combined with sort of his enthusiasm for the magic side of it, right? Like
Yeah.
the going to the show version. So somewhere in between those two influences, I guess I kind of found myself.
Well, that's such a cool way to grow up too, having the
Yeah.
tangibility of seeing a performance and then watching something on the silver screen. What came first for
Yeah.
you though? Was it like the writing? Was it the directing? What, or maybe it was just a general love for the arts
I think it's
themselves?
storytelling. I
Mm.
think it's storytelling before anything. I mean, I was really young. I think I started talking about doing this when I was like 7 or something like that. Yeah,
Oh
it was
my
a
god.
long time. And I think it was stories, right? So like having a little journal and writing down stories. I was obsessed with like Greek mythology and my father is from Iran, so sort of stories from other parts of the world were always really exciting to me. And so I think just falling in love with books, I guess, stories and books, and then starting to write my own stuff. And then I think, again, the directing just felt very natural, because again, how performance art works is the performer is directing their own piece, right? So I would see my mom sort of ideate a performance, right? She would have sort of these things that she wanted to put together, and then she would take that idea to the stage, right? And it would materialize. And so that's really what we're doing, right?
Yeah.
And so I think being exposed to that process, it just felt very organic to me. And so that idea of bringing a story from page to, in this case, page to stage, and for me it was page to screen. Really it's the same thing. It was very it just felt like that's where the meat and potatoes is, like
Yeah.
that's the challenge, that's the intellectual challenge, it's the logistical challenge. It just felt like that's where the magic was really happening, right? So I think it just felt very natural. I mean, I think I did my like in fourth grade, they make you do like a little book report, right? On like, what career do you want?
Oh no.
And I think it's so funny. I think I did mine was on Julie Taymor, who was doing the Broadway. She was doing directing Broadway plays at the time. Is Lion King and all this crazy shit. So I think it was always just very. I was just very drawn to that. I was just very drawn to that. And then I think, that just continued, right? Because my generation, I think we're very, very lucky. We're the generation of like handy cams and the first IMAX.
Mm.
And I remember my iMac, it was the turquoise blue. It was my most prized possession. This was a huge deal that we got one in the house. And it came with iMovie. So you
Whoa.
had, yeah, so it had all everything you needed, right? And you could, sort of find a little camera, somebody borrow from a friend or something, and you can shoot, you can edit, and you can export. Done. That's everything you need to know. And so I think growing up in that time of access to technology was very exciting, and it sort of taught you the flow of it. So I was kind of editing stuff. I would do these little videos, put it to like Bjork music or some crazy shit, just playing, right? You're 11 years old or something, and you're making little movies, and it's not it, it was not a you weren't reaching for the moon. It was very accessible. It wasn't like, the previous generation, I think, was on 16 mil, right? The little Bolex cameras, and editing and putting everything together was very complicated, right? You needed a projector, you needed all this sort of these steps, and we had it all in this one little iMac, right? Like everything you needed. You could do your sound, you could put music behind stuff, all this stuff. And so it really just, I really credit, not to be a shill for Apple here, but I think I think having access to all of those softwares at such an early age was great. So by the time I was going to film school, we all knew how to edit, right? Like we had been editing shit for 5 years at that point, right? Maybe longer, 10 years of making little movies. So I think just that leap in technology was really, it was good timing for me to sort of explore the film side of it, and not just because I was doing theater at the same time, but to
Oh
be able to
wow.
be making little movies and stuff with my friends in high school and all that, was just really valuable. So
Yeah.
that's my long-winded answer.
No, no, that's a perfect answer because I feel like a lot of people, yeah, it is complicated, utilizing 16 mil and editing and cutting and splicing and doing all that, creating the soundtrack. But
Mhm.
with, what we had growing up with iMac, with iMovie, for me, it was Windows Movie Maker until I hit high school, and
Uh-huh.
that was a whole nother
Yep.
thing. But you had
We're
this.
always a Mac family, by the way, because of my mom. So
Oh,
we
really?
had the Performa million, like we were a Mac family because of my mom. She was always like, Macintosh is for artists. And now she's very upset, right, that they've gone the consumer path. But
Yeah.
in the 90s, I'm aging myself. In the 90s, when I was growing up, 90s and early aughts, it was very designed for artists. So you had Photoshop, you had all this amazing software, that worked very quickly, and you had access to on your little desktop. So anyway, I'm sorry I cut you off.
No, no, no. I completely agree because I didn't notice that until getting into high school and diving into Final Cut Pro, which is something that I had bootlegged through
Yep.
LimeWire years before, and
Mhm.
you're already
Oh
familiar.
yeah.
So this new work ethic is instilled upon editors in high school. I graduated in 2010, so like
Mhm.
from that point on, if you weren't utilizing that, you were lazy.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
completely I don't know. I connect with everything you said about being an artist, going through all that while you're in high school making movies with your friends, and how that has really benefited your I guess even the start to your career, so to speak. So you already know what you're doing before you get to film school.
You already know. You're already learning. I mean, montage. You're already learning what a close up is, what a wide shot is, how to use a tripod so that it doesn't look like super shitty. Like you start figuring out, oh, if I lock it this way and I move it this way, you're already starting to figure it out. And yeah, I just think our generation really we had a real leg up because of
Yeah,
that access to software and technology was great.
yeah. Where did you go to film school, if you don't mind me asking?
I went to NYU, so I went to NYU Tisch, and it was great. That was the dream, I think, for a long time. I think, like, basically my entire high school career, I guess. I don't know how you're supposed to refer to high school, but the entire time was sort of designed with the interest of going to NYU. I had an amazing arts professor who really encouraged me, I think, and was excited that I was so focused on it. And so, he helped me put together like the film that I submitted as my submission. And he really, I guess we kind of made like a bit of a private study kind of thing, because he would help me. I had a little corner in the arts in like the media center that had like Final Cut Pro on it, and it had, I had my little camera cabinet and stuff. So I think he was excited that somebody really gave a shit about this stuff, and so he really helped make the time, and helped that junior year putting together like a really strong film submission, to get in. And then film school is film school. I think the debates about film school are all perfectly valid and very healthy, I think, and important, because it is extraordinarily expensive for what is basically an arts degree, and I think that's real. I think that's a real conversation that is very important to be had. For me, it was the right move. I met people who, to this day, I work with. They're my team. We had access to like professional level film sets. It was like all that kind of stuff. I think for us was was the move. Um, but again, a lot of people dropped out and just went out and did their own thing. And uh, there's many different paths, I think. But for me, NYU was the move. And I also was lucky enough to land again. Great teachers in your life. I was lucky enough to land. I think sophomore year on, I was working for one of the directing professors at NYU, and so yeah, so I was basically her TA, and she was very old. She was a very very old woman who really couldn't do very much physically. Like she was
Yeah.
sharp as a tack, but she had a little stroller thing, and she couldn't really get around very well. So I really did everything for her class, for her workshops, the directing workshops, the acting for camera workshops. So again, having access to people who really were excited that you were excited and gave you access to that stuff was, invaluable for me. And she was just a treasure trove of knowledge. She was I think one of the first women probably in the original directors unit, which was like Elia Kazan's workshop, basically,
Oh
back in the
God.
day. I'm telling you, she was up there in age. um, but so she would have these stories, about sitting in the row and Marilyn was being so loud and and she kept laughing. And you're like, Marilyn Monroe? Like, so that was her world, was like Arthur Miller was there and Elia Kazan and all these amazing, yeah. So
Oh my
just being around that was
God. Yeah.
really great. And you're just a sponge, right? Like you're just trying to soak in all the information you can. So yeah, she was very old school, right? Like
Mm.
method directing, method acting. But all that stuff sort of combines for you in film school when you're trying to find yourself.
Mm.
Um, and I just I would be very different filmmaker, I think, if I didn't have all those influences at that time. So for me,
Yeah,
it was
I'm jealous just hearing that. I mean,
yeah,
my university I went to was great. Don't get me wrong. It was in Denver, but
yeah. That's
that none of that was there. So that's insane. And with that comes so many, I guess, so many people who you can look up to and idolize through the life they had lived before. But did you have any filmmakers or artists you looked up to before you went to college, as far as not to match their career with the one you want to build, but just, artists that you looked up to? Do you have anybody in mind when you were,
yeah,
direct or write?
of course. Yeah, definitely. I mean, when I was really young, I loved Tim Burton, like when I was like a kid, and it wasn't even like his films. Obviously, I loved his films, but I think I got a copy of his sketches or something, and I think I was probably like 12 or something like that. And I just loved his total ownership of his own style. And I thought that was so exciting and fun. And so I think just that idea of doodling and journaling and like creating your own universes, creating your own worlds was very inspiring to me as a kid. And then yeah, I mean, for me, the big thing is I'm a huge science fiction nerd. So I think seeing 2001: A Space Odyssey and Blade Runner were two pretty seminal moments for me. I saw 2001 when I was really really young, and then was sort of obsessed with it for a long time. I'm still obsessed with that movie. I don't really understand how the fuck that movie what's going on. That movie is
Yeah.
insane from start to finish. So that's just like a perennial sort of black hole of interest for me. That movie is. So obviously Kubrick. That's all to say. Kubrick
Mm.
was the guy. And then of course being from New York, I was a big Scorsese gal. That was that was always that was I just and actually my favorite was Mean Streets was the first one. That was the most raw, um, the most sort of like really felt like New York to me. And so he was a big deal. I went through my French New Wave phase in high school, like everybody else. So I did that whole thing, and yeah, you kind of take your journey through through film history, and then in college really was when I discovered horror. So I didn't really like get into horror movies, I would say, until really like later in college. I think because my dad was really scared of horror movies,
Really?
so like the furthest he would go is Alien. Like we watched Alien together and we loved Alien, but that was
Okay.
more sci-fi, like we would watch Star Trek together, and we were more sci-fi people. So I worked at a video store in college, very, sort of
Oh, you
cliche.
lucky.
Yeah, and so that was really where I was like, Hellraiser, what the fuck is this? Like this looks crazy. And started really exploring horror and that kind of stuff. But that was later. So yeah, I would say those are like the main influences. I really in high school got into Wong Kar-wai and Hong Kong cinema, so that was like a big sort of opening, I guess, for me of like, whoa, this is cool. Like just the cool factor of it, like
Yeah.
why is Tony Leung the coolest motherfucker on the face of the earth? Like put a pair of sunglasses on that guy and he's like the coolest dude. So yeah, I would say, Italian cinema as well. Watching Dolce Vita, and so international cinema also in high school was very exciting. So it's a real discovery process, right? Like I
Yeah.
think every filmmaker, you start with the films that your family watches together, right? That's the beginning. And then, one day you go to a movie theater and they're playing Apocalypse Now and you watch it and your mind is completely reformatted, right? Like, oh my God, I didn't even know you could tell stories like this. So I think that journey of discovery, we all have it, but we just kind of have it we take different sort of tributaries and paths to get to that experience of opening your eyes to different ways of telling stories and different characters and different parts of the world. And so
Yeah.
that I think that is a universal experience that all filmmakers have at some point.
Yeah, no, I totally agree, and I haven't had the good fortune of watching Imitation Girl yet, but
Oh,
having watched Lucky, and my girlfriend and I have essentially bonded through horror films throughout our entire relationship, and us absolutely loving the film. I do see, those influences you were talking about in little pieces within the film
yeah.
that just and it just I don't know, it's this how did I describe it? It is a s'mores level, like, bite of just pure
Mhm.
deliciousness as a film. It is
I like that.
incredible. The message it has
Yeah.
is amazing. The look, I mean, just everything about it was so captivating. And now you are, it seems like you're venturing out into more of the, horror genre. Do you
Mhm.
feel like that's something you want to stick with for a little bit, or are you just kind of, going with what feels right gut
Oh,
wise?
I love horror. Yeah, no, I really love horror. I think, that again, that was something me and my friends, I think, really discovered together. And I mean, I remember me and my best friend from age 6 or something, we went to see The Descent together, like just starting to, yeah, I love The Descent.
Whole
um,
okay. We gotta unpack
But
that, but yeah,
yeah,
keep
we
going.
love that. But, just that bonding experience, I think that you bond with the person next to you when you're watching a horror movie in a really special way, right? That's
Yeah.
like a real experience that we're having together. So I think that getting into going to see like midnight screenings and renting horror movies and watching them with your friends, like that was a really exciting part of my adult life. And so that it has obviously the stuff you grow up with is really special, but it was a really exciting time for me to push myself and be like, wow, cool. So how did they make this scary? Like I know what's happening. I know that there's sound design and they're just not there's no light in that part of the room. That's why you're scared of it. But how, right? Like it really feels like a real fucking magic trick. And that always stuck in my head. I was like, how do you make a scene tense like that, because it's not reality, but you're feeling real emotions, right? Like it's a real response to something that is so crafted. And I thought that was just very exciting to me because I am very interested in craft, right? Like that's also the science fiction of it, and I'm interested in creating worlds, not just doing like a verite approach. again, talking about French New Wave, it was a brief love affair with French New Wave, and then I was like, okay, let's keep going, right? Like
Yeah.
there's more here to explore. And even when in French New Wave, I was more into like the Alphaville or the not Melier, Melville films or Melier, right? Like
Yeah.
the original sort of magic trick stuff was more exciting to me than the straight documentary verite approach. So that's all to say, horror is like sort of it's the ultimate articulation of craftsmanship, right? Because you are really crafting something. People are just in a room together. There's nothing scary about that, right? Like
Yeah.
it's you're really crafting the experience from the ground up. So anyway, that's the nerdy answer to. I just think it's really challenging, and I really love that. And people go into horror movies wanting to be scared, but you still got to take them there, you know. Lucky, I would say, is interesting because it's a satire. It's not really a horror movie. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It is a horror movie. I don't mean to say that. It is a horror movie because horror is myriad, right? Like is a horror is a really broad umbrella, and within it
Absolutely.
there
Yeah.
is comedy, there is terror, there is all these other things. So to me, Lucky is really a satire. I call it like the skin of a slasher movie. You know,
Mhm.
it's really a satire wearing a slasher movie on it, on top of what it really is. And so I think I'm very excited by movies that find that junction of it is a horror movie, it's wearing the horror movie skin, but then there is something else that you realize you're watching about halfway through, right? So you're you're watching a horror movie and you realize, oh, this is a satire, right? Like this is a Eugene Ionesco-esque kind of exploration of how women get through their lives in our society. So I'm very excited by that junction of horror and something else.
Yeah. I think that's what makes it stand out above films that have tried to do this similar story before, like this never ending. And actually, it's like the since the inception of the slasher, it's the killer that can't be killed and keeps coming back, right? But
Yeah.
I think the trailer did enough with it to say, oh yeah, there are slasher elements, but there's a piece of this you need to watch the movie to find out, what it is. There's something inside this box. And
Mhm.
as we were watching it, I we just couldn't look away. I don't think I talked to her through the entire film, which usually, like, if you're sitting with somebody that you love, it's you're like, "Oh my god, check this." We didn't say a single word. Like, we giggled when things were way too uncomfortable and the satire really pierced through, and I'm like, "I
Yeah.
wanna shake the husband so bad." Where is
Yeah.
there's just and I won't spoil anything about the film in case you haven't seen it yet. It's on Shudder, so watch it. Um, but I do love that like you said, that junction. It just looped me right in, and now, like, you became one of my favorite filmmakers within a single movie. I'm like, can't wait to see what else she does. And
Yeah.
then, as we mentioned before, which we won't get into, but you were announced to take part in another film that
Mhm.
I'm
Yeah,
super
I'm
excited
doing a VHS segment for VHS 1985, which is really cool, and it's pretty wild shit. Like I can't believe it's an amazing lineup. It's an incredible lineup of filmmakers, and it is just, I'm feel like a baby. Just incredible people who I really respect. Scott Derrickson, of course, a legend in the horror community, and David Bruckner, who I think is one of the most interesting filmmakers
Yeah,
working right now. I'm lucky enough to we have a really beautiful friendship, and he's a really thoughtful filmmaker who is conjures up these just really sort of earth-shattering visuals with his films that are so closely linked to what's happening emotionally that it's not even the plot, it's not even what's happening, it is some deeper connection that he's able to make. And I've just been fascinated with his work. The Ritual is the first film of his that I saw that really blew me
really.
away. And then he's done a bunch of anthology pieces, including VHS. He's on the original VHS, and he has a really beautiful film, I think, from last year called The Night House. That's equally challenging. Yeah,
Yeah.
just really beautiful filmmaking. So they're on it. Mike P. Melson, who's a really exciting filmmaker, and then my friend Gigi Salguero, who is a really fun kind of grindhouse filmmaker from Mexico. So she'll cook up something really fucking crazy, I'm sure. So yeah, it's just an incredible lineup of horror people, and I'm really excited to be a part of it.
So, I mean, tell us what's your segment about? Is there a monster? Is it what's the story? Give us all of the snippets, all the
I
spoilers. I
can't
won't
get
tell
into
anybody.
it.
I won't tell anybody. No,
I
I'm kidding.
I can't get into it. I think the VHS producers will be really mad at me. I will say we filmed a lot of the segments already, so you
Oh,
guys
cool.
people won't have to wait too long for it to come out.
Oh,
But I will say I think it's okay for me to say, I think people see 80s and they kind of think like, oh, roll of the eyes, like Stephen King,
mm,
Stranger Things, nostalgia, like sort of sweet. There's a lightness, I think, associated to the 80s nostalgia. And this film, I think, is really going to challenge that because all of these filmmakers are interested in, we're interested in big ideas.
yeah.
And I think we're taking a very different tack to the 80s. So
Oh shit.
it won't be the light and fluffy 80s nostalgia. I can say that.
Well, I'm excited for that. I like I said before, I won't twist anything because I don't want to know anything,
Yeah.
either way as a VHS fan. And
Mhm.
I don't know, just I don't want to say congratulations for that because that's
Yeah,
awesome. I mean,
it's
just you get to
awesome.
make your own segment and show off all these crazy styles that you've accumulated. But
Yeah.
I do want to ask you about your writing process. And as a writer myself, I just love hearing about the various processes that people go through to create a screenplay. Some are absolutely bonkers and crazy, which I
Mhm.
mean, if you're a writer, you have to be. But
Mhm.
what sort of process do you have? Is it outlining? Do you have different dry erase boards? Do you write on plywood and wash it off and write over again? Like what's your
My process has honestly really changed.
Mm,
It's changed and it's not changed. I think that I've brought a lot more structure to my process, which has been really good for me. I mean, just to take a little step back, talking about NYU, I will never forget that a one of the professors, sort of we were having a meeting about, and it was like a feature screenplay, narrative screenplay class, and she kind of sat me down. She's like, "You're a really strong director, but I just don't know if writing is for you." She was basically like, "Maybe you're just not a writer," and I was like, "Bitch, what?" And that really, that kind of like stuck in my head. I was like, oh God, maybe I just come to other people's work, whatever. Um, so I always thought that was funny. And by the way, I'm now writing a studio project, so shove it up your ass. When people tell you that, don't listen to them. Just use it as a fuel for the fire to get better at what you're doing. So that's all to say. I think originally my writing was very focused on my filmmaking, which is to say, I had these sort of things that I wanted to see on screen, and so I would sort of back channel the writing and the screenplay into what I wanted to create. And obviously, that's not the way to do it, right? So my scripts would have like these really cool sort of set pieces, and but it wouldn't necessarily be that engaging of a like where are we going? How do the characters relate? Like all that kind of stuff. I think was interesting to me from an intellectual perspective, but I wasn't as interested in like blocking out that arc for those characters. I was more interested in like what the set pieces were and that kind of stuff. Again, you're young, right? Like you're in high school, you're in college, you're out of college, that's you're exploring, right? Like you're not going to come out the womb, perfectly fully formed. You have to get there. You have to build. You have to kind of follow your interests. So that's all to say. I think once I started getting paid to write, that was when I really got more strict with myself, because you have to balance your own interest with what the audience needs. And so I think that was the most important thing for me, was like, can an audience really track what's happening here, right? Like
yeah.
sacrifice a set piece if you need to, because we need to have people be able to follow you through this story. And of course, there's plenty of films that don't follow that, right? Like we were talking about Wong Kar-wai. That dude couldn't give a shit. He's like, listen, either you're with me or you're not. That's on you. And that's great. And I enjoy to watch it, but that's not necessarily the films that I want to make. I think I want to have an audience with me and we go on this journey together. So I think that's sort of the crux of it. I make these big maps. So I have like a big like artist pad, and then I'll just map out sort of like act 1, act 2, act 3, and
Oh.
then just sort of like do it's more of a, like, geometry. Like, I can't start on a computer. I need
No.
to be pencil and paper. I need to, like, sort of feel it in a more organic way. And then but you can do that till the cows come home. So I think at a certain point, you have to kind of cut yourself off and start putting words down because then all of the weak points are exposed. So it starts as sort of a, more sort of an abstract blue sky roughly structured thing that sometimes includes doodles or like they're very sort of it's not a word document that's in an outline. I will also say, the last few big projects I've worked on have been adaptations. So like last year I was doing I was adapting a Joe Hill short story, and I'm adapting another big sort of I guess like literary short story, like a piece of literature is something else I'm adapting right now. And finding, I think, really delving into that first and having that small piece that you know is going to be a part of it, finding where it fits, plugging it in, getting that done, right? Like feeling like sometimes I'll even type out that entire scene. So my outline will have chunks that have dialogue in it, right? Because if I'm
Oh,
pulling
wow.
from a story and I know I want this dialogue in here, I'll just put it right in. So but using a different font. So when you look at it, it's like the outline is in Arial or whatever, and then the script parts, I'll just go ahead and use Courier. So you can kind of start to
Oh, okay.
see, okay, this scene is already basically built, and then a bunch of shit happens, and then this scene is built. So then it's less scary, right?
Yeah.
Then it's less intimidating because it's like, "Oh, cool, I already have this scene in the middle of act 2 written." And now you're just sort of putting the connective tissue between stuff. So that was a big helpful thing for me, but that's specific to adapting stuff. But, yeah, I don't know. I feel like I'm not really answering your question.
No, no, you are, 'cause honestly, I feel like no one has, unless you've been doing this for decades, and I've talked to a few
Mhm.
people who've been writing for decades, and they have their system, right?
Yeah,
But at least for, where people are right now who are, really building their careers, things are ever changing, and I love just the visual of the adaptation outline and having those chunks
yeah,
of dialogue in the scene. Like, it's, I don't know, I'm a huge nerd when it comes to the writing process, so
yeah.
even I prefer the question to not be answered with, "Oh, yeah, I use the, 40 note card method." Like, "Okay."
Yeah, no, no. I think you have to find what works for you. I think the really frustrating thing, and this is something with experience I've just learned to accept, is there will be days when you just you can't make anything productive. And I think it's because, and I think a lot of writers talk about this, they call it
Mm,
like the background processing of you're just banging your head against the wall. I mean, I remember at one point, and I was like 3 weeks away from deadline, and I was like, I can't, I'm not going to make it. Like, I can't do this,
oh, wow.
Yeah, I don't see the path is not clear to me. Like this is impossible. I'm a garbage writer, I'm a garbage human, like I can't do anything, whatever. And then one day you're cooking, lunch, and boom, there it is. And the computer clicks, it pops out an answer, and you're like, okay, cool. And that's because your brain is mechanical, right? Like your brain, you need to make those connections, those sort of like neural connections, in order for your brain to sort of process. And then as a writer, I think your responsibility is to, when that happens, get to work. Like then you need to drop what you're doing, you need to focus. And that's when you have those like 5, 6 hour writing sessions where you just like pop out the big chunk. And then of course you go in and you change everything. But that I think that those 2 days of hating yourself and ruminating, and then that 3 day, that's 3 days of writing. It's just
Yeah,
2 days of hating yourself and one day of actually getting words on paper, but all 3 days are days of screenwriting. And that sucks, like it
yeah.
sucks, writing is really hard.
I feel so seen right now.
It's true, it's true, and I think, writers, are honest about that. And,
Yeah.
to be completely honest, and I have friends who say this, and I respect their work and all that. Nothing bugs me more than the people who are like, "Oh, I wrote this in 4 days." And I'm just like, "Did you? Did you though? Because that's bullshit. You were thinking about this for 2 months. You sat down and you put pages out in 4 days," which also
Yeah.
I don't get that. But, uh, That it's not true. It's not true. You were thinking about it. You were jotting down notes. You were typing notes in your phone, like that's all part of the creative process. So it kind of bugs me when people are like, I wrote this in 4 days. I wrote this in 6 days. And it basically didn't change. And you're like, okay. Sometimes you're like, maybe it should have changed. Maybe the development process has some merit.
Now I just want to see you on a panel with other writers
Oh
when
my
somebody
God,
mentions that, so we can zoom in on the eye roll that you're
just
going to
the
try to see.
blank space.
Oh yeah, good for them. Great,
Good
wonderful.
for you. I'm very happy for you. I'm sure your life is really great and easy, but the rest of us have to fucking struggle the whole way through.
Well, speaking of the honesty of that portion of the craft, actually, I've never asked this before. It'd be interesting to find out. But do you have an imposter syndrome remedy for days like that, where you do feel like you're just a garbage writer or you're a garbage director? Like, I need to go do
Talk to
something.
other people. Reach
Okay.
out to other creatives. I think that's the only thing, because if you stew in your own head, the anxiety wins, right? Like you're not going to win that battle.
Yeah.
You're just not. The brain is too powerful. It's very tricky and demonic. I think those are the moments when I pick up the phone. I'm very lucky. My husband is an incredible creative himself, but he's a cinematographer. So he works with cameras and
Okay.
lighting and lenses. And so I think he's a really good person to talk to because he has access to it, but he's also not like trying to give solutions. Sometimes if you talk to another writer, they're like, well, have you tried this, this, and this? And I'm like, that's not what I'm coming to you for. I just want to commiserate. So I think talking to somebody who's going to just let you be in your feelings. Sometimes talking to other writers is good. Hey, I'm really stuck on this. Do you want to go for a walk? Do you want to, can we have a quick, let's talk on the phone for half an hour, just reaching out and getting it out and saying, it's okay that I'm feeling this way. And, I mean, I remember I reached out to my friend and I was like, I don't think I can do this. Like they hired me for this gig and obviously they believe that I can do it, but I don't see a path forward, And it was good because she was like, man, I'm feeling the same way. She's like, I'm working on something right now. And I pitched one thing and now I'm trying to make it work. And I don't think it's working and I have to pivot. And so I think just communication,
Mm,
because the thing is, we're all feeling it. And the problem is the perception that we have of the people around us, right? This is Instagram, this is
yeah.
social media, this is like the curse of the internet age is you just post the good stuff, right? And I'm not saying anything new or exciting, but it's just when you pick up the phone and you talk to a real human being, you will get back what you need, I think.
Yeah.
If that person is a good friend.
Right.
um, yeah, that's the only remedy is just to
Yeah.
say, I feel like I can't do it, like I'm feeling this way, like, and just knowing that other people are also feeling that way sometimes is what you need.
Yeah.
Um, and I think letting go of this idea of what your career is supposed to be, right? So you spend so much time, you spend the first, 20 years of your life planning who you're going to be as an adult. And here you are, I'm 34 years old. Like, I didn't think I'd have this old ass dog, but I love him and I'm so happy, right? Like, surprises happen in your life and beautiful things happen. And so you only open yourself up to those things happening if you let go of that spurious idea of who you were supposed to be. So, you go through your life, I'm gonna be fucking Martin Scorsese. Okay, Martin Scorsese isn't Martin Scorsese. You know what I mean? It's letting go of that complete bullshit fantasy of how life is supposed to happen, how your career is supposed to happen. And the reality is most of us are just going from day to day to day, and that's it, you know, including the high profile people who you thought you wanted to be. Um, so I think letting go of that is, and it's not easy. I'm not saying it's easy. It's very difficult. Um, but that's it, and it's not just career, right? It's like, oh, if I lost 10 pounds, then I'd be perfect. You know what I mean? It's that thing. It's that thing that we all do. And that's it, baby. That's your body. you know, enjoy it, go use it, go for a hike, you know. So I think that that reevaluation and kindness to yourself is really the only way to get through it.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. And the idea of letting go is something I'm 10 years into this acting thing.
Yeah.
And as I let go right after I turned 30, that's when I started booking a hell of a lot more.
How many times have I heard that? Oh, it's
What
so
the
true.
fuck?
It's so true. Yep, that's exactly right.
So I appreciate you bringing that up because I think the listeners of this particular podcast need to hear that as well. Just
Mhm.
separating that and you brought up being kind to yourself, and this also, we talked about the imposter syndrome remedy, but what do you do to decompress just from your day to day when you are writing, when you are on set? Do you have a process or like things you like to do to kind of relax and get out of it?
This is extraordinarily important, and I would actually say I would suggest that you reframe the question to like, what do you do to bring pleasure into your life? Because
Ooh.
the idea of what do you do on your off time or what do you do on while you relax is inherently problematic.
Mm.
Because what we do is so looped in to our day to day. We don't go to an office, right? Well, maybe some of us do, but we don't you don't go to an office and be like, okay, now I'm going to be creative from 9 to 5 and then I'm going to go home and watch TV. Like that's not our lives.
Yeah.
Our lives is it is intense periods of intense creativity and joy. More often than not, it's rejection, right? Like it's an equal balance. So I would almost reframe that to say, how are you structuring your life so that you have something outside of your career that is not something that you consider your relaxing time or your off time, but inherent and totally as crucial to your day-to-day life as the work.
Yes.
So
Okay.
what is
Yeah.
that, right? For a lot of people, it's family, right? Like, oh, I'm going to spend time with my kids. I'm going to do this. Um, uh, I'm a musician. I play violin. I love music. Yeah,
We're
right.
just now getting to that. What? I'm a horrible interviewer. What the hell?
No,
Okay.
because it's just for me. It's something that's for me, and like once a week I go to there's a conservatory over here and I play music and that's really important for me and it's like that is really important for my husband. Again, I feel like I'm talking about him a lot, but this is something I bring it up because we both suffer from anxiety, right? And so we got together when we were 24, right? So we've been together for 10 years and it's been a journey, right? Because we were so ambitious. When I was 24, 10 years ago, I was so ambitious. I was like, work is life. I'm gonna fucking make it as a director. This is me. My entire thing is based on this shit. This is it. I even stopped playing violin, right? Like it was so intense. And maybe that was the right thing to do at that time. Maybe that's what I needed. But it had really, really, I think, destructive impact on your mental health and sort of how you're approaching your day. And so now we're older and wiser. And we talk about all the time like you have to have other stuff going on. So for him, he's really into cars.
Oh,
And so he'll go karting, right? He'll go karting with his brother. Um that's the kind of stuff that isn't just like, oh, I have time off, I guess I'll go. It's no. Every other week we do this thing. This is important. This is prioritized. Day to day, I love to cook. Like cooking is really important to me. I like making healthy meals that make us feel better. um, so that's sort of like a day to day thing. Going on walks with my dog, listening to music. So the particulars don't matter. I think what's important is reframing your question, not to say what do you do to relax. It's what brings pleasure to you in your day to day. You
yeah.
know, and wrapping that in an equal wrapper as the work. The work and the pleasure in your life need to be coexistent.
Yeah.
It can't be one or the other.
No, I couldn't agree more with that. And that the reframing of that is 100% just having that be and addressing mental health as well, with so much rejection in a business that is any business is unstable, but this in particular is dog shit as far as stability goes.
Yeah.
Um,
And I don't like the term tough skin. I think that that's
yeah.
also really unfair. Like again, it's a really unfair framing. Like people are like, "Oh, you have to have really tough skin to be in this industry," and it's like tough skin. I'm not a reptile. Like I wasn't born with, it's like you're born with tough skin or you're not. It's no, this
Yeah.
is a technique. It's like learning to meditate or any of these really hard things. Like you have to, there's a technique to it, right? And it's something you learn and you grow and you get better at. So it's, again, this idea that I think is really toxic in our industry of bursting forth fully formed, able to handle rejection. I don't give a
Oh my
shit.
God.
I'm Michael fucking Bay. I do what I want. It's bullshit. Like Michael Bay has his bad days too.
Yeah.
Like you just you start to develop a technique to get through it and to wrap it into your day-to-day
Mm.
routine so that it just feels part of the natural flow, the natural ebb and flow, the natural cycle of your day, of your career, of your
Yeah.
year, of whatever, getting bigger, bigger, bigger.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I don't like the framing of a lot of this stuff. It's like kind of rubs me the wrong way.
Yeah, well, and I think we are getting away from the whole, like, tough skin,
I hope so.
like, era of making it in this business where people who say that are often the ones that are now being, imprisoned, thankfully.
Yeah,
Uh
good point. They're abusers, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Because that verbiage, that language
Mhm.
enables them, right? It enables abusers.
Yep.
It's like in this industry as a filmmaker, you're supposed to just get hit over the head over and over and over again. And if you decide you need to break your week because you didn't have tough skin, that's abusive.
Yeah.
I think that's a really good point. I think that's a really good point.
Well, I'm gonna steer this to something a little goofy.
Yeah.
Uh, and this is the one question I always have a hard time asking, but it is, asking the guest I have on the show whether or not you have a party story you could share with our listeners. So it could be something that is just maybe really hilarious, crazy, or maybe scary, but something that has such an immense impact on your life you could easily recount it at a party amongst friends. Do you have anything within your career or your life? It doesn't have to be entertainment based that you could
I
share
have
with
a
our
story
listeners.
that I'm not gonna tell, but it is a Weinstein story, a New York Weinstein story, I think from like 2015 or something like that.
What?
Yeah. It was there's some crazy shit going on even when I was a baby, a little baby in the industry. Thank God I am making movies when I'm making movies now. Like
Yeah.
I really think I think I would still be making films, but I think I would not be engaging with the sort of status quo of the industry. I think
Mm.
that I would probably be more on the art film side. I mean, I'm still in an indie space, but I think I would be so sort of turned off by the status quo in Hollywood. And it's still bad, like it's still pretty gross, but there's just a lot more space, I think, now for communication and conversation. And I'm having really good experience with some high end producers right now, and it's a lot more women, and so I think I just count my lucky stars for that. Also, my lucky scars, my lucky stars, and my lucky scars, for sure, for being able to work now. Um, I mean, I guess a story that comes back to me all the time is just a story of bonding with your people. I have my producing partner is a great guy named Tim Wu. We run our production company together. We have been working together since sophomore year of college.
Oh my god.
Came up through camera, so he was a camera like a DP camera operator. I would often AC for him, or I'd be working on like the sound design side or something. So we came up through crew together, and so we just have a lot of just like that shared history as crew is like impossible to like recreate. And so really growing up together, I think as filmmakers has made us really great producing partners. And now he's producing, which is amazing to have somebody with a crew background producing, and he's really fucking good at it. So anyway, we were on a job. I was directing, he was shooting, for a really crazy producer. He's really, really nutty guy. And, he liked to use drugs. and alcohol, and he was just coked out of his mind. We were at the Standard Hotel, Standard LA, which is a very wacky, funky place. And, Tim and I are kind of just minding our own business. We don't partake in any of this tomfoolery. And so we're just, having a beer or something, playing ping pong. Next thing we know, we just see like this naked man streak by and dive right into the pool, in the Standard pool. And it was this guy. It was guy, and of course security is like, sir, you can't be here. He got banned from the Standard, like all this stuff. And you know what Tim and I did? We just kept playing ping pong, like, I don't know this man, I've never seen this man before in my life. So I like that story because there is a degree of like, there's some crazy shit out there, and you know what, you just keep your eyes focused. You have your buddy in the trenches and you just keep playing ping pong, mind your business, do your job. And we've made it through okay, despite being in some crazy situations, because we just kind of like, man, this shit is crazy. Sir, you cannot run naked, coked out of your mind through a crowded restaurant and jump into the pool.
Oh my
So
god.
just tomfoolery,
I
But
love those stories, especially with like crew friends, because you
yeah,
guys are always the ones, like, you are laughing more than the people you're telling the story to every time you say that, right?
yeah. It's very funny. A lot of crazy crew stories. And the truth is, the real sort of value of those stories of being crew, and just sort of sitting there while the director is losing their mind and stuff, is you bank it all, right, in your head. You're like, okay, this is what not to do. A lot of the reason Tim started producing was because he was like, this is ridiculous. You guys can't get decent food for your crew. It was like, we can just do this better, after all this time of being on set. And so we just started producing our own for ourselves, and it was better. So that's kind of where it is. Sorry, my dog is repositioning himself. Do you want to?
Let him find comfort.
Yeah. Come in or out. He's very old.
Yeah, how old is your dog?
He's 11.
Oh.
Yeah. He's a
Oh.
rescue. Are you stuck? Yeah, he moves at his own pace, I guess, is
Yep.
how I would describe him.
Like, I'm over this, you telling me what to do is business. I tell
I
you what to do
know. I think
now.
he gets too warm in one spot, so he likes to kind of like go out to different areas.
Oh
So
yeah, that's
anyway,
what.
there he goes.
Oh, there he is. Listeners always saw was a furry butt
Yeah.
in the corner. Well, with your career, the like amazing projects you've created, the people you've worked with, the life you've had already, and I can't wait to see what else you do in the future. Do you have anything you could pass along to our listeners, whether it's somebody who's starting out or someone who's trying to stay in, that maybe you've utilized in your career that you could pass along to them?
Yeah, I think for the starting out side, I think patience is a virtue, but more important than patience is like making sure your bases are covered. So I always like to talk about just the reality of what we do, being, you could go many months, maybe even years without working. And without being paid to work. We've all been there, and it's really hard. So I think the question is, how do you support yourself, make sure you're in a safe place? Because if you don't feel safe, you're going to make bad decisions for your career. You're going to sort of just jump at whatever opportunity you have. And not that you shouldn't follow every opportunity. It's just, you want to do it in a sort of way where you're acting out of this is a project that appeals to me, right? Like, there's something here for me. um and if you need to support yourself with a second job, with a third job, finding that job that's going to give you the flexibility to still do that audition, right? To still drive to wherever, to take that Zoom meeting, to find time to write, so I think being very specific about, it really comes down to what we were talking about before, right? Like, your day to day, the reality of your day to day. Your day job may not just be a day job, right? Like, find something that is still fulfilling for you if you can. Or, I worked at a coffee shop for a long time. It was amazing. You get to meet amazing people. You get so many ideas. You can sort of jot down ideas. Finding a way not to just look at your day job or whatever it is you're doing as oh, this is just what I do when I'm not acting, or this is what I do when I'm not directing. Because that's your time, that's your life, you know? And so I hate that idea of I'm just here waiting for it to end so I can get back to my other thing. And so finding ways to sort of integrate your, let's just call it a day job, but it could be whatever, um, into your creativity is going to, I think, help you feel less frustrated. It's going to make you feel more financially stable, right? That's important.
Yeah.
And it may be access to a side of yourself that you wouldn't get if you were just in your apartment writing, right? Like you don't want to live in a vacuum. So I mean, it's easier said than done. I know day jobs suck. I totally get it, but it's a reality, you know. Unless you're lucky enough to be born where you don't have to work for money, in which case, great. But even then, it's like maybe you're finding the job that you wouldn't have thought you were going to get, and maybe it pays you a little bit less, but you have 3 hours in the morning to do what you want to do. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So trying to find that thing that's going to allow you to integrate your creativity and whatever other aspect of your life it is that you're juggling. Um, and that goes through the work too, even once you're getting paid for the writing or the acting or whatever. Um, the truth is, you could be an established director. I mean, I am friends with directors whose names we know off the top of our head, right? Those guys are worried about next year. Like the industry is really unstable. And yeah, it's a lot of money up front. The money goes. Life is expensive, you know? So it's an evergreen comment of like, how are you supporting yourself? How are you integrating your life into your creativity? And then this idea of pleasure has become really important. This is something my husband and I talk about quite a bit. Like, what are we doing to not wallow, to use our time, use our day, use our weekend? Um, you know, there's this reality of like when a movie comes out, you have this like sort of postpartum experience of like suddenly it's just over, right? Like after this intensity. And so we were just talking like maybe we book a trip to Idlewild, you know, like 2 hour we drive with the dog and we rent a cabin for a few days and turn off our phones. And you know, so it's like how do we integrate these little things into our lives so that we can not get bogged down and not be in our heads all the time. I think that's just really essential at any stage of your career.
Yeah, no, I think that's crucial, and it's something that all of us are working on, especially after the 2 years we've had, and this spiral of madness.
Well, and it continues on. I mean, we talk
Yeah.
about money, like, I know this isn't a podcast about money, but we as artists are typically pretty bad with money, myself included. Like, I'm not good at, you know, like, it's really hard, you know, to
Yeah.
either not be totally panicked about it or to, "Oh, I got a fat paycheck, now I gotta fucking do all this crazy shit I've always wanted to do." And so, you know, going to a financial workshop is really helpful. You know, educating yourself on that because we don't get that education, and we are actually the people who need it the most because we don't have 401ks. We don't have somebody putting part of our paycheck aside. Like, teach yourself how to do taxes, or better yet, get a tax accountant, you know, who knows the industry. So I think all that education is something I wish I had done earlier, and I'm still learning it, and it's really hard. But you know, it's finding that education so that you can feel a little bit more calm about the money will help you with your creativity so that you're not like constantly in a panic. You know. Or you're not in that mode of like, oh, things are good now, but next year I'm scared. You know,
Yeah.
you can't live your life like that. You can't move forward. You can't move forward with your life like that. So um yeah, sorry, that's
Yeah,
very like real world stuff that's not fun to talk about,
but
but
it's needed, right? It has to be said, and everyone has to educate themselves. I mean, myself personally, if I receive a check, I've said this in every single episode, but it's so fresh, I'm still worried about it. But I left my service job in July to
Mhm.
pursue
Congratulations.
this, and just
Mhm.
thank you. It's fucking frightening.
Yeah.
But it goes with that where, you get your check and then that check goes to bills and you go, what can I sell that I own?
Mhm.
Uh,
Mhm.
And at the end of the day, it's like I'm considering starting an OnlyFans where I'm dipping my elbows in mustard. Like it's just like the weirdest way your brain can try and cope with it. But no, I think that's very much needed. You know, it's not something we talk about a whole lot on this podcast, but I think we should bring it up more and more, especially now. You
I
know,
mean, it could be interesting to get like I have a friend who's a financial advisor. She was an agent for many years and she quit being an agent to be a financial advisor because she realized we don't know what the hell we're doing with our money.
yeah,
And so she talks a lot about like building a budget and because she understands that we could go 2 years without working. And you know, if you're lucky enough to sort of have like WGA health care or any of the guild sort of support, that stuff is great, but it has an expiration date. You know,
yeah,
like if you qualify, you have it for X amount of time and then it's gone and you need to book another job. And so how do you sort of be smart about all that stuff?
yeah,
She's a really interesting person to talk to, and I think just generally like understanding how taxes work and how to
yeah.
build a budget and that kind of stuff. This is all stuff I'm terrible at, by the way. I say this as this is aspirational. I'm not good at this, but I know enough to know that I should know it. So
You make it
yeah.
sound so convincing. You shouldn't have said that. It was so. It was right there.
Oh, it's crazy. I mean, now once just wait until then you have a business account and then you have your personal and then your
Oh
business.
Jesus.
And then, yeah, so it
Yeah.
gets really crazy. But yeah.
Well, I before we wrap up this episode, I do want to ask if there's anything that we can promote with this episode. I know Lucky for sure I'm promoting because I love that movie. But is there anything else I can promote for you? Whether it's an organization, a charity, something you really believe in, anything I can place in the show notes for you?
Yeah, thank you for the support of Lucky, and I think if people are fans of the VHS movies, they have a new movie 99 that's coming out soon on Shutter. A lot of my friends worked on it. Great group of folks, and then you know keep your eyes peeled for 85 next year. I would say, you know, I am Iranian American, and there's a very sort of exciting, important, scary, terrifying thing happening in other parts of the world, not just in Iran, in Ukraine, all over in South America. And I think whether or not you feel motivated to support the movement in Iran right now, you know, even if it's just reposting on social media or just educating yourself, I think just more generally, keeping your eyes open, like download an international news podcast if you don't have one on your phone. Like don't just listen to American news. BBC Global News is really good. You know, find a way to be aware of what's happening around the world because it affects us, it affects our industry, and it really affects us as creatives. You know, as artists, I think we hopefully err on the side of anti-authoritarianism, of being against dictators and dictatorships in all forms, and supporting the fight for freedom and autonomy around the globe. So I think we really need to be aware of what people around the world are doing. As Americans, we're so blessed and privileged to be in this place, as complicated and fucked up as it is. We do have voice. We have a voice, and so using your creative voice and your ability to access the internet and podcasts and journalism, I just want to encourage. If one person downloads an international news podcast off of this interview, then I'll be very, very happy. So, yeah, that we are all part of a global family fighting against dictators, and you know the fight for freedom in Iran is the same as our fight for freedom here.
Mm-hmm.
It's just taking different shapes. So we're all in this together, and yeah, storytelling will just very important right now to be aware of everybody's stories and support each other in this big fight, because it is more than, oh, Michael Myers is coming to kill me. It
Yeah.
is actually about creativity, authorship, and being free.
No, thank you for bringing that up. I don't think anyone has mentioned international news podcasts or international news sources like BBC. That is incredibly important. So, listeners, I mean, you're listening to this. I mean, this is an hour. I hope you would listen to something else a little more. I don't know, informative. Not to say that this isn't informative, but pay attention to global events and make sure that you are aware of everything that's happening because like you said before, put yourself in a bubble or a shell. You said in your apartment,
Mhm.
and you go outside, the world's just going to collapse in on you like right away, and you won't be able to lend your voice.
That's right. And as creatives, I think you'll be really uh, inspired probably by stories from around the world, you know,
Yeah.
and sort of characters and events, and maybe something will spark for you, and you'll sort of deep dive into Iranian mythology and sort of like why are Iranians like this, you know? It's like, oh, because they had an empire for thousands of years, and you know, where does language come from, where does art come from, you know, all those things are all part of our creative DNA. So I just
Yeah.
urge people to yeah, be a member of the global community. That's all it is.
Boom. There it is. You heard it. I have one thing I have to do before we say goodbye to this recording, and that is our awkward goodbye. But I do want to say thank you so much for coming onto the show. I was so happy when you showed an interest. I'm glad we had a chance to sit down and chat. And I saw your pupper even for just a second. But I do have what we call an awkward goodbye, and it's loosely based on a scene from Wayne's World. Essentially, what I'll do is I'll give you a silent Wayne's World countdown. Imagine this microphone is a camera, and I'm just going to count 3, 2, 1. When I point to you, give us your best verbal awkward goodbye, and I'll end the recording from there. Does that sound good? Can you be awkward?
I'll try. Verbal goodbye. Okay. So,
All right.
all right. I won't prepare anything. I'm just going to say what comes to me.
Don't even think about it. Don't even
Okay.
think about
Not
it. Right.
anything. Yeah.
Here we go. In
Khoda Hafez. Goodbye.